Welcome to Whiskey and Warehouse. I'm your guest MC, Dennis Heppner with JBF Consulting. Today we have two leaders in supply chain. Brian Carlson from Cornerstone Edge, he's principal there. And we also have the CEO of JBF Consulting, Brad Forrester. Welcome, Brian. Welcome, Brad.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis.
Before we go too much further in our conversation here, I'd like to just remind the audience, if you hear something you like, give us a thumbs up. If you want to hear more on the topic, or if you have a direct question, just drop it into the chat and we'll get to it the best we can. So we're going to have a short conversation today about some of the differences that Brian and Brad see when they're doing implementations of WMS, specifically Brian's area, and TMS, which is Brad's primary area. And talking about specifically about retailers, because that's where we have a lot of experience around shipment planning and execution. So guys, as you sip on your bourbons, consider this first. Why do traditional brick and mortar retailers feel forced into a WMS first mindset model that prioritizes facility throughput and labor optimization versus transportation optimization?
I'll take that one first, Dennis. Thank you. So as we look at the executives analyzing whether they implement the warehouse management system or the transportation system first, a lot of times they feel like, whether it's accurate or not, that there's a tangible value in their budget on labor cost. And many people know labor costs are escalating. Labor costs have been increasing in the last several years. Finding labor right now is extremely tight, and a lot of times that's the driver. We just spent some time the last week looking at a company where they're cutting out 20 people and some changes that we're making in the warehouse management and transportation systems. And the reason they're doing that is not to cut out people, but to know that they can't grow because they can't find people in their market. And so because the labor market is so tight, a lot of times there's this challenge that, hey, we want to go with the WMS first so we can focus on that.
Yeah, and I'll take that a step further. Not just the implementation sequencing of WMS to TMS, but also the integrated design, the order flow from ERP to WMS to TMS is also really problematic, especially in retail. And to Brian's point about labor savings and labor optimization, on the transportation side, we also have goals and objectives to hit from a freight cost reduction. You know, our clients want to implement a TMS to save money on freight spend, which is, in the past 3 years has been a very volatile kind of market from a pricing perspective. No different than labor, but they're not necessarily correlated. And designing a system that flows from ERP to WMS to TMS is always going to prioritize labor first as opposed to freight spend. And these things aren't easy to change, right? So it's very difficult to change it from an ERP, TMS, to WMS. And we don't see that happening a lot in retail. And I think a lot of that is driven based off of, if you're a brick and mortar retailer, you're not necessarily getting orders from your stores. You're pushing out an allocation of inventory to the stores. And that's where I think historically we've seen ERP pushing allocation down to the WMS. They wave plan it, they pick it, they execute, and then they send back whatever was actually shipped to the TMS. What our constituents on the logistics side don't necessarily realize at the time when they're investing in the TMS is that neuters a lot of the return on investment that you could possibly get from freight cost reduction through optimization and consolidation of orders.
Well, and a lot of that challenge, and I think that's a good word, the neutering of the savings, the excuse that the warehouse management system and that project team focuses on is, how are we going to handle parcel? How are we going to handle the freight charges for that? If you're dealing with parcel shipments, you really don't know the exact dimensions and weight of each box that's cartonized. You really don't have a complete understanding of how many boxes are being shipped. And so the excuse is you really can't do transportation planning on the parcel side because you really don't have all the information. And there's certainly a value in looking at it from other standpoints, but that's the reason why a lot of times the warehouse management system goes first, is we have all the information at shipment time as the product goes out the door.
So let's dig into that a little deeper there, Brad, and Brian. That we traditionally see parcel execution in WMS versus the TMS, but is there a kind of a happy medium? Brad kind of made his case for shippers that want to focus on freight savings because traditionally transportation is a bigger spend, more opportunity for savings, but you can see tangible savings sooner in the WMS. Is there a common ground there that kind of each camp can meet in the middle on?
Yeah, I think there can be, but it requires some design thinking and it requires some investment, because I agree with Brian. I mean, parcel execution specifically, especially for retail, has been historically a WMS function. And 25 years ago, transportation systems didn't have parcel really capabilities. But I think what we've all seen and experienced in the past several years has been an explosion of e-commerce, even from traditional consumer product companies that are shipping direct to consumer. Parcel is important. Parcel freight spends are increasing dramatically. And we're seeing a lot of desire and goal setting from our clients on the transportation side to control costs. Let's pick better mode selection. Let's consolidate where we can. Instead of shipping a parcel 5 zones from Boston to Los Angeles, let's ship it 1 zone from Los Angeles to Los Angeles in a zone skip to save money. And I think what retailers are going to be challenged with, and other firms with the WMS first model, is how do we integrate a system that can capture some percentage of savings potential on the transportation side through like an aggregated volume of here's the replenishment amounts. Let's see what we can consolidate in the transportation plan first before we do a wave plan in the WMS and we get down to labeling an actual carton with a specific dimension. But then I think the other critical requirement is whatever the WMS ships out comes back to the TMS integrated as an actual. We need the DIMS, we need the tracking number, we need all of that information to pay the freight bills, because that's what our shippers are expecting out of their TMS as well. So it's not just about consolidation and savings opportunities. That's big, it's growing, especially for parcel, but we also need the accurate details that only the WMS can give us.
Well, and you touched on, that information going back and forth is critical, and historically the integration between a transportation system and a WMS was much less complicated than it is today, or quite frankly than it should be today. Making sure that there's more real-time visibility between the systems, making sure that the parcel calculations are done on the front end from a transportation standpoint, for zone skipping and for everything else that you mentioned, is critical. And historically, that's not just been included, but it's been ignored. And so as you go through the design process with a warehouse management system and a transportation system, you really have to have I hate to call it this, but I'm going to call it a battle. The battle is the ultimate solution. The battle is to make sure that you don't just optimize one side at the expense of the other. And you really need to look at how can you look at the whole system and the whole process. And yeah, you might lose a little bit in labor savings as an example, but you'll gain significantly on the transportation side, or you might lose a little bit on maybe parcel savings because you made a bad decision on the front end, but you gain significantly in efficiencies in other ways. And so having that process where you integrate everything together, having a clear conversation about it is really important as we look at design.
Yeah, I think that's a great call out, Brian. You do need to have a conversation. Those two different functions tend to have different objectives. And especially if the WMS is implemented at a different time as the TMS, then it just amplifies that potential for conflict.
Okay, well, I think we're about at the end of our time here. I'd like to thank and offer cheers to both Brad and Brian for the time today. This was a compelling topic. Although our discussion was short, I think it was very valuable for everyone that's joined us today. For those that want additional information, Please comment on our LinkedIn profiles. They're easy to find Brad and Brian on LinkedIn. Comment, reach out, say you want some more information, or of course you can go to Cornerstone Edge, or you can go to jbf-consulting.com. Thank you again, Brian and Brad. We hope to see everyone again at our next whiskey roundtable. Shoot, I don't know what we're going to call the next one. We'll let you know what the next one's going to be.